and this is loading a sample that I have. I just dragged a data flow. I just said File, New, Project, Integration Services Project. That's all I did, just to make it a little quicker. Drag the data flow task on, and then expanding the data flow here. So I have an OLADB source, which is a SQL server source. Again, this is this good old dating game boyfriend thing. And I did a really simple, you wouldn't even need a transformation. I did a copy column just to show kind of the flow. Then I put a data viewer on here because you can. And this is, this is the visual debugging capability that is available. You can actually see the data as it comes through the pipeline. If you want to, implement some sort of transformations as you're loading or loading data into SQL Azure, obviously you're usually going to do that on-prem before you load up. But you can do that. And then here's, of course, the key. This is the destination. And the beautiful thing here is, of course, it just works. So you simply fill in the connection string information, and then once you fill that in, then you simply do the mapping, and it works just like on-prem. Of course, you have to be cognizant of which features are supported, as we've talked about. Though this would be the preferred tool in my mind for large migrations if you have the in-house talent to understand SSIS. So if you're more comfortable in the scripting sort of environment, then that's the environment that you're going to want to use. But particularly if you want to use parallelism, if you want to set up transactions, rollback points, SSIS is the way to go. So this comes from SQL Cat team talking about parallelization and network performance. Of course, latency is physics. Long distances, high latency. If you're putting your data into the Singapore data center and you're from, the East Coast of the U.S., that's a long distance. You can parallelize, but bandwidth is key. This is just logical. Once you've reached the bandwidth limit, you can parallelize all you want. It's not going to matter. So we have data centers currently in 6 locations. They're shown here on the slide: Chicago, San Antonio, Dublin, Amsterdam, Singapore, and Hong Kong. So the SQL Cat team set up this perf example that I wanted to include. So here's their table. Basically, it's a simple table. It has 600 bytes per row, has 100,000 rows, has around 7,700 pages, 60 megs, and has even distribution on the primary key. It has a compound primary key. It has, again, should be non-clustered key on the character 50 column, and no triggers or relationships. So just a sort of a baseline. So again, this is a best practice to set up a baseline so you can figure out if you're doing complex migrations, how your migration is performing against the baseline. So this is what they got when they were first working with this. And this is a little old now. This is probably 8 months old, so it's probably going to be faster. But this is, I know people always ask for actual numbers, so I wanted to share this. So you can see you've got high bandwidth, medium latency, high bandwidth, high latency, low bandwidth, very high latency, and low bandwidth, medium latency. And they show parallel versus native sorted, native, and then different batch sizes. So you can get some idea, given these factors of bandwidth and sort or unsort and parallel or not parallel, how their test performed. And again, this is a good metric to just duplicate in your situation. It's not going to be that difficult, and then you can get your own sort of baselines. So this is upload. You can see how this works. And here's download. So you can see that our factors are the same in terms of bandwidth and latency: high, medium, high, high, medium, very high, medium, medium. And then we have a 4x native sort, batch size 1K, a 1x native sort, batch size 10K. You see the difference there in performance. All right, and here's some guidance they've given based on their experience working with customers. So splitting your data into multiple concurrent streams, tune the BCP batch size and the network packet size. And here, so if you're not a network admin, you might need to involve your admin to do that. Add your non-clustered indices after loading data into SQL Azure. Now this is really important. Listen to this. 2 additional indexes created before loading the data increase the final database size by 50%, and here's the kicker, increase the time to load by 170%. So considerations about data migration that you already know from on-prem become magnified. You want to be very conservative and have very clean and simple data. Notice it says if you're trying to build a large index and you see a throttling error, use the retry online. So, and that's an index option. All right, we have a new command for SQL Azure only, copy database, same or different servers. It executes so quickly that I normally don't demo it because even though you have this sysdm underscore database underscore copies DMB to check the progress, you basically just, it's like almost instantaneous in the same data center. So the syntax is create database, database2 as copy of. Next, we have SQL Azure Data Sync. Now, this might not be for migration scenarios. It might be more for production scenarios, but I wanted to throw it in because it's kind of interesting. So right now, we've got 2 CTPs, or betas. One that anybody can go to in SQL Azure Labs, just to kind of see how it works, is it's between servers or databases between databases in the same data center. Most of you will probably only have 1 server. I actually have 2 servers, so I can go between servers and databases in the same data center. And this is a broad CTP, so you can kind of see how it works. Conceptually, data sync looks like replication. So it's no code. You click to set up the synchronization schedule. You set it at the level of the object, which is the table, and then you specify the conflict handling, and you see the logging, and you get monitoring. CTP2, which is currently a very small invite-only beta, allows synchronization outside of the cloud, so between the cloud and on-premise. There's a whole bunch of business scenarios for this. Migration is not really directly, but it's just an important set of capabilities that I wanted to share. So this is actually how it looks. I have access to CTP2. So you create a sync group, you specify your databases, you have logs, and then your objects in the databases, and then you have agents. And if you want to synchronize, for example, between SQL Azure and on-premise, then you download the agent to enable that to be possible. The way that this works is there's the tables, and then you have tracking objects that are created. So these are on source and on destination. Again, to me, this looks conceptually like replication, but let me be clear, this is not replication, but it helps me in understanding it, so I share it that way. So you have these tracking tables, you have triggers and stored procedures. And this is showing in this example, Library 1 and Library 2, keeping the authors and the books tables synchronized. We have CTP3 coming this summer, so if you're interested in this, we encourage you to sign up. We're going to be working on the UX. We're going to be allowing you to select a subset of columns in the table and to filter. So again, similar conceptually to replication. Ability to make certain schema changes without having to reinitialize, which could be very important in cloud. You can specify conflict resolution and then usability enhancements. So when we talk about the portal, means that first portal that I had showed you, the web-based portal, to have some integration with the capability to do sync, which might be interesting from a developer standpoint. So if I have a local instance that I'm developing against, and I'm creating applications going to be front-ending a cloud-based database, and I want to make some changes and then send it up to the cloud database and then test it. This is kind of interesting around that scenario. So it has some applicability to migrations. Generally, when you're doing migrations, you're going to want to do monitoring to make sure that the space is not being exceeded. You're going to want to trap the out-of-space exception 40544, and you can use the dm underscore db underscore partition underscore stats view. Also, it's not directly related to migration, but again, we get so many questions about it. We do not currently have database backup or restore or point-in-time restore, but it is such an asked-for feature that it is in the front of our roadmap, and we're working on it very diligently. So we will have it. We do not have it at this point, but we know that it's an actual deal breaker for some people. So this is one of those things you want to really watch the blog, watch the Twitter stream for when it betas and then comes out in release. All right, so I talked about all these wizards. I talked about the copy database command. I talked about the other tools. One thing I didn't mention is an OData front end, which is also a CTP, which is the Atom Pub style or REST style. It didn't really show the import-export tool beta yet. It is now available at SQL Azure Labs. It's like last week or so. It's command line currently. We do want to get it integrated into the GUI, both the portal and Migration Studio as well. So this is your summary to figure out when to use what for what. Use your tools for MySQL and Access, your migration tools. To move the schema, you can use the script wizard, a DAC, SSIS. To move the data, script wizard, SSIS or BCP. Move large data, SSIS or BCP. Again, if you're just trying out, use the SQL Server Migration Wizard from CodePlex. It's the fastest tool to just try things out. To get set up, you want to go to SQLazure.com, get started. This is how you get to the free 30-day offer, no credit card or anything. Really recommend that if you're just getting started that you set this up first, then move into MSDN, if you have that, to get your trial up and going, and then you can figure out some baselining in terms of migrations. As I mentioned, we are really wanting a lot of feedback, especially around our betas. That's why I included them. The import-export tool, the data sync, OData. So if you have a specific idea, and you can see the number one here, I just snapped this from the screen, is to enable backups and point-in-time backups. And that actually got moved up the feature roadmap because of the number of customer requests. We really want to build a product that is useful and workable for you. So please give us feedback. You can also give me feedback directly through my blog, SoCal DevGal. Or just contact me that way. We also have a new community site. So if you do try out SQL Azure and you get an application or two in production and you'd like to share with the community, we'd love to hear your story. We're going to put videos up, stories, best practices. We really want to have a virtual place for our SQL Azure community to communicate. One thing I'll point out on this slide is we've got MVPs now, or Microsoft Most Valuable Professionals, around SQL Azure. I believe there are 11 in the world, and these are early adopting customers who have production applications in SQL Azure, and many of whom are also educators or professional communicators. They most of them have great blogs, lots of good information, and I encourage you to take a look at that in addition to the resources we make available. For this, I recommend that you look at the team blog. We have a developer center. There's SQL Azure Labs. Follow on Twitter. And then we have a Windows Azure Platform Training Kit. One thing I end every presentation with on a little bit different note, in addition to my work as an evangelist with Microsoft, I have created a volunteer organization that is called Teaching Kids Programming, and information can be found at teachingkidsprogramming.org. And this is to help the next generation of programmers get on board, in addition to using Microsoft Small Basic to teach traditional programming to kids ages 10 on up, and providing free courseware and teacher training. So if you wanted to run an after-school program or teach your own kid, you could go out there. We have some classes that are to teach kids basic T-SQL. We have two different classes. One is at datinggame.codeplex.com. And that is actually the dating game database I've been showing you. We use that to teach high school-aged girls T-SQL by helping them to find the best hot boys for them. We have recently created a new version of this that plays well with young guys. We call it Insulting SQL. So it's a similar concept. We have a database of insults, and we have English statements that they translate into select statements with progressively more difficult where clauses. The fun and sort of interesting thing about this is we've enabled these to run on SQL Azure. So we've created database structures that are 100% SQL Azure compliant, and we've actually taught the class using the web portal, which is a zero install, and a very fun way to try out SQL Azure. So thank you very much for joining me for this webcast. I hope you found it to be helpful. Again, I'm Lynn Langett. I'm L. Langett on Twitter, and my blog is SoCal DevGal.